At my sister's funeral, I got a text from an unknown number. I'm alive. Don't trust our parents. I remember standing there, the preacher's voice drifting over the crowd while the wind tugged at the black suit I had barely managed to put on that morning. My sister, Amara, had been everything to me, my best friend, my other half. And now she was gone. Or at least, that's what I thought until that message lit up my phone. I nearly dropped it right there in the cemetery. My hands started shaking, and I tried to slip the phone back into my pocket before anyone noticed. I glanced around at the crowd of mourners, half expecting to see someone smirking at me, playing a cruel trick. But everyone looked somber, heads bowed, eyes on the casket. Except my parents. Gerald and Lorraine Carter stood at the front, not a tear between them. My father's jaw was clenched, his hand heavy on my mother's shoulder. She had that distant look in her eyes, like she was attending a business meeting, not her daughter's burial. It made my stomach turn. I kept waiting for some kind of breakdown, for a crack in the mask, but it never came. I couldn't focus on the preacher's words anymore. My pulse hammered as I read the text again. I'm alive. Don't trust our parents. The words cut through my grief like glass. My first thought was denial. It had to be someone else. Maybe a wrong number. But the timing? During the funeral? That couldn't be an accident. Memories of Amara rushed in. How she always said she didn't trust Mom and Dad. How she whispered about overhearing strange conversations late at night. I'd brushed it off as paranoia, telling her she was overthinking. Now I wasn't so sure. The casket began its slow descent into the ground. Everyone around me sniffled, wiped their eyes, and clutched tissues. I just stood frozen, my fists tight at my sides, trying to decide if I was losing my mind. I typed back with trembling fingers. If this is a joke, it's not funny. Who is this? The reply came fast. It's me, Amara. Please listen. Don't let them see this message. I swallowed hard, staring straight ahead at the polished wood sinking into the dirt. My parents hadn't looked at me once. I wondered if they already knew. I wondered if they were the reason I was getting this message at all. For the rest of the service, I couldn't hear a thing. All I could feel was my heart pounding, the weight of the phone burning in my pocket, and the sickening thought that maybe my sister wasn't gone. That maybe the people standing just a few feet from me had lied about everything. A week earlier, the police had called it a tragic accident. They said Amara's car had swerved off the road late at night, the vehicle crushed beyond recognition. That was the story written in the report, the story everyone accepted without much question. But as I stood there replaying the funeral in my head, small details kept circling back, details I hadn't dared to face until now. When I asked to see my sister's body before the burial, my parents were quick to shut it down. My mother said the damage was too severe, that it would only scar me to look. My father agreed, saying we needed to let her go with dignity. At the time, I felt guilty for pressing, but now that message on my phone twisted the memory into something else, something darker. The casket had been sealed from the start. I was told it was better that way. No goodbye, no last glance, no final proof that my sister was truly inside. And I believed them because grief had left me numb. But now I wondered if I had been tricked. The part that disturbed me most was their behavior after her death. My parents moved through those days as if they were handling paperwork rather than losing their daughter. There were no sleepless nights, no red eyes, no raw displays of pain. My mother spoke in measured tones. My father gave short, cold answers to anyone who asked about Amara. The neighbors offered casseroles and condolences, but my parents treated it like a formality, nothing more. I remember sitting at the dining table, staring at the empty chair Amara always filled, waiting for someone to say her name. But the silence stretched on. They never mentioned her, never shared memories, never wept. It was as though she had been erased, not lost. At first, I told myself maybe they grieved in private, but the text message made me doubt everything. Was my mind spinning stories out of heartbreak, or had Amara's warning ripped open the truth? I kept seeing her smile in my head, the way she used to laugh so loudly it shook the walls. Could that really be gone forever? Or was she out there somewhere, scared and hiding, depending on me to believe her? I replayed the night of the accident again and again. Why had no one questioned why she was driving alone on that road? Why did the police investigation wrap up so quickly? Why did my father seem so eager to move forward, to push through the funeral with no room for hesitation? The more I thought about it, the more my chest tightened. Something wasn't right. If Amara was alive, then my parents weren't just hiding the truth. They were part of it. And if they could lie about this, I had no idea what else they were capable of. My hands shook as I typed the reply to the number that claimed to be Amara. I asked them to prove it, something only she would know. A few seconds later, my screen lit up with words that made my stomach drop. They mentioned the old crawl space under our porch where we used to hide candy from Mom, and they called me Mallymal, the nickname Amara had given me when we were kids. Nobody else could have known that. It wasn't a stranger. It was her. I couldn't sit still after that. Every part of me buzzed with fear and hope tangled together. If Amara was alive, then everything I thought I knew was a lie. I typed quickly, arranging a place to meet. We couldn't risk anywhere crowded or close to home. I chose the small park on the far side of town, the one we used to walk through when we were teenagers, the one nobody went to at night. When I arrived, the air was heavy with the smell of wet grass. The lamps barely lit the pathway, and each shadow looked like it could swallow me whole. I stood waiting, glancing at my phone, then at the empty benches, wondering if this was some cruel setup. The sound of footsteps pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned, and there she was. Amara stepped into the light, her hood pulled low, her shoulders hunched like she was carrying the weight of the world. My chest tightened at the sight of her face, tired, pale, but alive. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. She looked like she might vanish if I blinked. I whispered her name, and her eyes filled with tears. She came closer, trembling as if she hadn't slept in days. When I reached for her, she flinched, then finally let me hug her. Her body was cold, her hands shaking against my back. She pulled away quickly, eyes darting around like she expected someone to be watching. "They did this, Malik," she said in a cracked voice. "Mom and Dad. They wanted me gone." The words hit harder than anything I had imagined. I asked her what she meant, but she shook her head, begging me to keep my voice down. She said our parents staged everything, that the accident was a story they created to make her disappear. Her fear was so real I could feel it in the way she held onto her sleeves, in the way she kept scanning the trees around us. I wanted to ask her 100 questions, but all I could do was stare, trying to process that my sister had been declared dead only days ago and now stood inches from me. In that quiet park, with the night pressing in around us, I realized nothing in my life made sense anymore. My sister was alive, and my parents were not who I thought they were. We sat on the cold bench, the night air wrapping around us like a warning. Amara's eyes shifted constantly, as if the darkness itself carried threats. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, sharp, and filled with things I wasn't ready to hear. She told me she had walked past Dad's office one night and overheard them talking. It wasn't grief in their voices, not stress, not concern. It was business. They were discussing numbers, paperwork, and what would happen once I was no longer part of their plans. I froze when she said that, our own parents planning to push me out of the family as if I didn't exist. But the worst part was why she became their target first. Amara had stumbled onto something she was never meant to know. Dad wasn't just the polished man everyone saw in public. Behind closed doors, he was involved in schemes with money, insurance policies, and deals that would ruin him if anyone found out. She had seen documents that didn't make sense, names that weren't real, policies taken out on people without their knowledge. When she confronted Mom quietly, hoping she'd protect her, it backfired. Instead of comfort, Mom told her she had a choice: stay quiet or be removed. That was the moment Amara realized just how far they would go. I sat there stunned as she explained how the so-called accident was built piece by piece. They filed reports, pushed a narrative, and created evidence. They made sure I wouldn't question it by controlling every detail, keeping the casket closed, and rushing the funeral. I asked her how she managed to survive if everything was planned so carefully. She explained that on the night she was supposed to disappear for good, a close friend of ours, Mr. Harris, the man who lived 2 houses down when we were kids, helped her slip away. He had suspected something wasn't right and offered her a place to hide until she could figure out what to do. Without him, she said she wouldn't be standing here now. She described the days since then as a blur of fear. Changing places, staying quiet, making sure nobody followed her. She hadn't reached out sooner because she wasn't sure if she could trust me either. But when she saw my face at the funeral, broken and lost, she decided I had to know the truth. Listening to her, I felt my chest tighten with anger. I wanted to deny it, to protect the image of the parents I thought I had, but her words lined up with every strange moment I'd pushed aside. The calmness, the closed casket, the documents, they weren't just oddities anymore. They were evidence. Amara grabbed my hand, her grip trembling but firm. "They will come for me again," she whispered. And if you're not careful, they'll come for you too. The night after meeting Amara, I couldn't close my eyes. Her words wouldn't leave me. Part of me wanted to believe she was mistaken, that grief and fear had twisted her thoughts, but another part of me remembered every strange detail I had ignored. I needed proof. The next day, when my parents went out, I slipped into Dad's office. The room smelled of leather and old paper, everything lined up in neat rows like he was proud of his order. My hands shook as I opened the drawers, careful not to leave a trace. At first, I found nothing more than bills, tax folders, and files labeled with business names I didn't recognize. Then, deeper in the bottom drawer, I uncovered a folder with my sister's name on it. Inside were copies of life insurance forms. My breath caught as I read them. Policies had been signed in her name only a few months before she supposedly died. The numbers were huge, amounts of money that made my head spin. What struck me hardest was the signature. It looked like Amara's, but I knew her handwriting. This was close, but not hers. Someone had copied it. I kept digging and came across another file stuffed with papers from hospitals I had never heard of. Medical records listed conditions Amara never had, visits she never went to, even prescriptions she had never taken. Whoever created them had gone to great lengths to make it look official. The dates stretched back over a year, as if this plan had been in motion long before the accident. The room seemed to shrink around me. My chest ached as the realization settled in. This wasn't just some mistake. They had set her up, piece by piece, making it believable for anyone who looked too closely. The daughter they were supposed to love had been turned into a number on a page, a tool for profit. I held the papers in my hands until my knuckles turned white. My own parents, the people who raised me, were capable of planning something so cruel. I thought about family dinners, birthdays, the moments that once felt safe. Now every memory carried a shadow. I stuffed the documents back quickly, making sure everything looked untouched. My hands were sweating, and I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I walked out of that office knowing I couldn't pretend anymore. Amara wasn't paranoid, and she wasn't lying. She had seen the truth long before me. The hardest part wasn't finding the evidence, it was accepting it. The people who were supposed to protect us were the ones who had betrayed us. And now, I wasn't sure how far they would go to keep their secret safe. That evening I sat across from my parents at the dinner table, my plate untouched. The documents I had seen weighed on me like a stone. I told myself to keep calm, to sound casual, but my voice still carried an edge when I finally spoke. I asked why the funeral had been rushed, why the coffin had been sealed. My father's fork clattered against his plate. He stared at me with a glare sharp enough to cut. "What are you trying to say?" Gerald's voice was heavy, the kind that filled the room. He leaned forward, his jaw tight. It was the first time I'd seen him lose his composure in years. I mentioned the insurance policies, not in detail, just enough to test him. His reaction was immediate. He slammed his hand down, rattling the glasses. "You don't know what you're talking about," he barked. His anger wasn't just irritation, it was fear dressed up as rage. Before I could press further, Mom stepped in. Lorraine's tone was soft, almost pitying. She reached across the table like she was comforting me. "Malik, you're grieving," she said gently. "You're letting your mind play tricks. Losing Amara has broken you, and now you're imagining things." Her words were smooth, but her eyes gave her away. They were cold, calculating, watching to see if I believed her. I sat back, my throat dry. I realized then that pushing harder could make things worse. They weren't simply hiding something. They were prepared to fight to keep it hidden. The way they looked at me, like I had crossed a line, sent a chill through me. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't their son anymore. I was a threat. Later that night, I met Amara again in secret. I told her how they had reacted, how quickly Dad's anger had surfaced, and how Mom had twisted my words. She listened without surprise, her expression grim. "That's how they work," she said quietly. "One scares you, the other makes you question yourself. Don't fall for it." I admitted how badly I had wanted to throw the evidence in their faces, to force them to confess, but Amara shook her head. "You can't push yet. If they think you know too much, they won't stop at me. You're in danger now too." Her warning sank deep. I could feel eyes on me even when I was alone in the house. My parents' voices carried through the walls in hushed tones, stopping whenever I got too close. They no longer treated me like their grieving son, but like someone to keep under control. I realized Amara was right. We needed patience. Rushing would only play into their hands. I had to act like I believed their story, while quietly preparing for the moment the truth could finally come out. Amara and I began meeting in secret, always changing the location so no one could follow us. Each time, she carried herself with more resolve, though the fear in her eyes never fully left. We agreed that hiding would not be enough. If we wanted freedom, we had to expose the truth. I went back into Dad's office whenever I could. This time, I didn't just look, I copied. Page by page, I photographed files with my phone, making sure every policy and forged record was saved. Amara collected what she remembered, giving me names of people Dad had met with and strange calls she had overheard. Together, we pieced the puzzle. We needed more than papers. We needed voices. At dinner, I started bringing up subjects carefully, pretending to be curious. I'd ask about finances or bring up Amara's name like I was missing her. Dad would snap, his tone sharp, and Mom would caution me to let things rest. Their reactions weren't admissions, but the tension in their voices hinted at guilt. I kept my phone in my pocket on record, capturing every exchange. It wasn't just us who noticed the strangeness. Neighbors had whispered about how quickly the funeral was arranged. A family friend remembered Mom signing papers at the lawyer's office only a day after Amara's supposed death. When I asked careful questions, these people confirmed details without realizing how important their words were. I wrote everything down, building a timeline that showed the cracks in my parents' story. But collecting evidence was only part of it. We needed them to expose themselves. That was Amara's idea. She told me to act like I was finally letting go, that I had accepted their version of events. So I smiled at the table, laughed at Dad's jokes, and nodded when Mom told me to move forward. Inside, my stomach churned, but on the surface, I was the obedient son again. The act began to pay off. My parents lowered their guard. Dad started talking more freely, dropping hints about money being secure, now, and Mom slipped into conversations about how family loyalty means silence. I let them speak, never pushing too hard, just enough to keep the flow going. All the while, my recorder caught every word. Each slip of the tongue, each half-truth, every angry outburst, they all became pieces of the trap we were setting. Still, the danger was real. I could feel their eyes on me whenever I moved through the house. One mistake, one glance that lasted too long, and they would know I was pretending. Worse, if they ever found out Amara was alive, everything we built would collapse. Every night after leaving their house, I'd meet Amara and share what I gathered. She would nod, her jaw tight, saying we were getting closer. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were preparing for the strike. I thought I needed someone outside of Amara to lean on, someone who could help carry the weight. My cousin Deshawn had always been around during our childhood, the kind of cousin who showed up at cookouts and laughed the loudest at family jokes. I convinced myself he could be trusted, so one evening I sat with him in his apartment and told him everything. I spoke carefully at first, then all at once, the text at the funeral, Amara's return, the evidence piling up against our parents. At first, he looked shocked, his brows furrowed, his head shaking as if it was too much to believe. He poured me a drink, asked questions, and nodded as I explained. For a short while, I felt relief, like I finally had another ally. I left his place that night lighter, convinced I had gained support. But the next day, things shifted. My father called me unexpectedly, his voice smooth but layered with something sharp. He asked me to meet him at an old warehouse he used for storage. His words were casual, but there was tension beneath them. I agreed, though something in my gut twisted. When I arrived, the place was quiet, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I parked but didn't step out right away. Through the grimy windows, I saw movement inside, two shadows, one taller than the other. One of them was unmistakably my father. The other turned slightly, and my chest went cold. It was Deshawn. I didn't wait to see more. I backed out fast, tires screeching on the gravel. My phone buzzed almost instantly, Deshawn calling, then texting, asking where I was, saying he thought I was running late. The lies were so clear now. He had lured me straight into a trap, serving me up to my father for a promise of money that didn't belong to him. The betrayal hit harder than I expected. This wasn't just a cousin. He was someone I grew up with, someone I thought was family in every sense. To know he had chosen greed over blood made my stomach churn. For a few hours, all I could feel was rage mixed with disgust, the sting of being played so easily. But underneath the anger came something stronger. If Deshawn was willing to sell me out, then I knew I couldn't afford to trust anyone but Amara. It was a painful lesson, but it also sharpened me. My parents weren't just manipulative. They had allies within the family. I couldn't let my guard down again. Driving away from that warehouse, I gripped the wheel so tightly my hands ached. My father now knew I had stepped too close to the truth, and Deshawn had shown me just how deep the rot went. The betrayal didn't break me, it fueled me. They wanted me gone, but now I was more determined than ever to bring them down. I knew the time for waiting was over. Amara and I had gathered enough, and the longer we stayed quiet, the more dangerous it became. We agreed the best chance was to corner them in their own home, to make them reveal themselves where they felt safe. That night, I walked into the dining room as if nothing had changed, phone hidden in my pocket already recording. Dinner started off tense but ordinary. Dad poured himself a drink, Mom moved food around her plate, and I pretended to eat. I steered the conversation slowly, mentioning family matters, then money. My father's chest swelled as if he couldn't help himself. With a smug grin, he muttered about how Amara's death had made everything cleaner. He didn't say her name with sorrow, only relief. The words burned into me, but I kept my face straight, letting the device in my pocket capture every syllable. Mom followed soon after. She leaned across the table, her voice low and sharp, telling me I had better fall in line, or I'd be next. It wasn't a warning of care. It was a threat, cold and certain. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay seated. They had just confessed without realizing it. I couldn't hold back any longer. I pulled the phone from my pocket, hit stop on the recording, and laid it flat on the table. Their eyes darted to it, confusion flashing first, then fear. I told them exactly what I had: files, signatures, conversations, witnesses, and now their own voices on tape. The calm cracked instantly. Dad shot up, his chair scraping across the floor. His face was red, his fists clenched, and he lunged at me across the table. I braced myself, shoving him back with all the strength I had. Years of anger poured into that moment, and for once, I wasn't the son cowering under his shadow. Mom screamed, rushing toward him, but before either of them could make another move, Amara stepped into the room. She pulled back her hood, her face pale but steady. The room froze. My parents' expressions twisted from rage into disbelief. For the first time, they were speechless. "You buried me," Amara said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "And here I am." The silence was suffocating. My father's body went rigid, his jaw locking as if he couldn't comprehend what stood before him. Mom's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Their carefully built lie collapsed in front of them. I stood beside Amara, recording still in my hand, no longer afraid. They had tried to erase her and silence me, but now the truth was staring them down. The morning after that confrontation, Amara and I walked into the police station with everything we had. I handed over the papers, the forged files, and the recording from dinner. Amara gave her statement, describing how she had escaped. The officers listened carefully, their faces hardening as the pieces came together. For the first time, I felt the weight shift off my shoulders. It didn't take long before warrants were issued. Our parents were taken into custody, charged with fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The sight of them being led away in handcuffs should have broken me, but instead it felt like justice finally breathing. Deshawn's part in the scheme surfaced too. Once his involvement was revealed, the family turned cold toward him. The cousin I once trusted was left standing alone, his greed costing him every bond he had. With the truth exposed, Amara and I became rightful heirs to what our parents had tried to control. The money and property were now ours, but neither of us cared for the wealth the way our parents did. We promised each other that we would never let it twist us, never let it poison us like it had poisoned them. In the quiet that followed, I often thought about how deep betrayal can cut, especially when it comes from those who are supposed to love you most. But I also knew that I hadn't lost everything. My sister was still here, and together we had survived what was meant to destroy us. They tried to bury my sister, but instead they buried themselves. Do you think I was right to stand against my own parents and expose everything? Or should I have handled it differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you think about my story.